Welcome to our 5-minute takeaway sessions presented by the Guild of Letting and Management. My name is Susie Crolla. I'm Managing Director of the Guild of Letting and Management. During this session, we're going to look at the key points of a Section 13 notice. And then we're going to look at the elements in relation to service of a Section 13 notice. The Section 13 notice is the statutory mechanism by which a landlord of an assured or an assured short-hold tenancy may propose an increase of rent to the tenant. Now, this procedure is very strict and governed by Section 13(2) of the Housing Act 1988 and aims to balance the landlord's right to obtain a market rent with the tenant's right to a fair and reasonable increase. So it's important to bear that in mind when we're looking at increasing rents within residential tenancy agreements. Now, this notice cannot be used to vary rent during the fixed term of a tenancy unless the tenancy agreement includes an express clause which permits rent reviews. The Section 13 is used exclusively during the periodic phase of a tenancy. So effectively, that's the rollover. So we're going to look at what the current legal framework is in current time. The first point is the eligible tenancies. Now, the Section 13 notice will only apply to periodic tenancies, whether they're statutory or contractual. And obviously, as I've just said, they do not apply to a fixed term period unless there is a clause permitting that rent review within the contract. The tenancy must be either an assured tenancy or an assured short-hold tenancy, as defined by the Housing Act 1988. The second key point is that this is a prescribed form. So the notice must be in a prescribed format. Its new name is Form 4, as set out in legislation which relates to assured tenancies and agricultural occupancies. The notice must include the following elements: the current rent, the proposed new rent, the date that the new rent will take effect, and the tenant's right to refer to the first tier tribunal property chamber. And we're going to refer to that as the FTT. The third element to bear in mind is the timing requirements. So the notice must not be served within the first 12 months of the tenancy or within the 12 months of a previous Section 13 notice. Currently, the minimum notice periods are as follows: at least 1 month for weekly, fortnightly or monthly tenancies, and at least 6 months for annual tenancies. So that's important to bear in mind the frequency of the rent, and that will impact the notice period of the Section 13. The next point is the effective date. Now, the new rent cannot actually take effect until the notice period expires, and the effective date must fall on a rent payment date. So this is known as serving notice in line with a rent date. If the date is actually incorrect or the notice does not comply with statutory requirements, the notice will be deemed invalid. So it's important to think about timeframes and also the fact that timing is extremely sensitive. Now, the final point is that the tenant has the right to challenge a rent increase. So the Section 13 has notes attached to it, and the tenant may refer to the notes on that notice, and it will give them an indication that they can apply to the FTT before the proposed effective date if they believe that the proposed rent is not a fair market rent. Okay, so that's important to consider and bear in mind. Now, the tribunal will determine the rent based on market evidence. the property condition, the location, and comparables. And it's important to really bear in mind here that it's the tribunal's decision that is binding, and in the current position, the rent may result in a higher, lower, or unchanged rent. If the notice is defective, so for example, failure to use a prescribed form or failure to provide adequate notice, it's important that the landlord would have to bear in mind they would have to serve a fresh notice from the notice period. Thank you for listening to today's session. For further information on the services we offer, head over to our website and subscribe to our channel. I look forward to seeing you next time.